what's going on, everybody? We've got three different people coming from three different rooms. We're all over the place today. Jeff and I don't get to hang out, but we get a really exciting guest to join us, and that is Josh Raglin. He is the Chief Sustainability Officer of Norfolk Southern. So Norfolk Southern is one of the largest railroads in North America. They're moving freight all over, and they're doing some really interesting projects in sustainability. Josh has been in the space over 20 years, and we'll let him kind of talk through that. But Josh, we're really excited to have you here today. I think it's really interesting coming off the announcement of the partnership with Remora. We've had Paul on the podcast before. They were patching off semis. Now they're looking to do that work off locomotive. That announcement comes out. We get to connect with you at a local conference in Atlanta. And so the timing is fantastic. I think you're going to bring a lot of unique information for our audience today, maybe in a space that they're not overly familiar with. So Josh, welcome to the show. We're really excited to have you.
No, I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So maybe we start with kind of the latest news, and we want to spend time on what Norfolk is doing outside of just the carbon capture of locomotives. But I think, that's what gets the big headlines. It's probably what our audience is excited about, talking about the carbon capture. I know that you met Paul, maybe 5 years ago. You were talking to him about the opportunities with locomotive, even when that maybe wasn't their core focus to start. So yeah, why don't you walk us through that relationship and what's going on with Remora and capture with the partnership in Norfolk?
Yeah, so I connected with Paul, like you said, 5 years ago. He was working truck technology at the time. We had a membership with the Plug and Play Technology Center, and that's how we originally connected. We had a virtual call, and I was really excited about the opportunity, for mobile carbon capture and what he was doing with trucks. And I told Paul, I said, reach back out when you're ready to scale and you're talking big numbers. I was like, because trucks are going to be very limited in how much fuel they burn, how much CO2 you can store on board due to the weight restrictions and space restrictions, which we really don't have in freight rail. So it was a great opportunity, and I had actually kind of forgotten about it, to tell you the truth. And Paul reached out last year and said, hey, I got it figured out, and you need to come to Detroit and take a look. And sure enough, they set up a stationary unit to simulate a locomotive engine. And we went up there here earlier in the year, me and one of my head engineers, and took a look. And we were super impressed with the technology, how far they've come. So they went from 5 employees to 50 employees, and now they've got $117 million in venture capitals. It's really exciting. They've got a great group of advisors, a lot of folks from the rail space that are very respected, a lot of great engineers. And it's exciting to see what they're doing, to be able to capture CO2 directly from the locomotive exhaust, so 70% reduction. But equally important is the reduction in nitrous oxides and particulate matter, up to 90% there, which is huge for us. If you think about how do we get our locomotive fleet, a lot of these older locomotives, maybe from tier 0, tier 1, all the way up to tier 4 standards.
Yeah, so we want to hear more about Norfolk, but we're going to jump right into this Remora thing, because I think capturing the CO2 is really interesting, and I agree with you. I think the trucks were very interesting, and it's a good market and needed, but the rail is and maybe marine in the future, things like that. But you mentioned tier 4, and years ago when LNG was really kind of coming to the forefront, we worked with GE and EMD on those, and nobody really had a solution of how to get to tier 4 other than maybe some diesel scrubbers and things like that. So I think this seems like it could be a great alternative. Where are we in that? Is there other alternatives to this technology? Is there any way to get to tier 4 without going pure hydrogen or electric or something of that nature?
So we do have tier 4 units available now from the locomotive OEMs, but they're really expensive. The maintenance is also...
I'm sorry, Josh. I lost your sound there. Can you start that over? Was it just me or you?
It's just me?
Fine. Oh, okay. Sorry. I apologize.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear everything fine. Just the first 5 seconds there just disappeared on me for some reason.
Sorry about that. Just imploded. All right. Holy cow.
Just splice that right back in. Just start over.
Tier 4 expensive. Boom. Hit it, Josh.
Yeah, so our locomotive OEMs do have tier 4 units available now, new units, but they're really expensive. The maintenance is higher, and they're not as fuel efficient as what we anticipated. So.
Oh, wow.
A lot of our units are tier 3 or lower, and we've done some work there to try to retrofit a unit up to tier 4, but that's still going through testing. So as we think about shipping emissions in general, Jeff, I'm thinking about truck, moving product over land. For our shippers, if you go from truck to rail, you're going to reduce emissions 75% on average, some cases up to 90%. You combine that with a biodiesel product, a B20, that's another 15% reduction. Once we're able to get to renewable diesel, that's maybe another 75% reduction. And then you throw in mobile carbon capture, get another 70% reduction. You throw those things together, and now we're talking real savings of 96% and higher of CO2 savings. So that really shows that there is a pathway to net zero. It doesn't mean there's not going to be challenges, but it really shows a legitimate pathway of how can we get from a trucking product to a rail product and show up at someone's door with zero emissions.
And
Yeah,
Josh, as you
about that
talk,
real quick. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go
yeah,
ahead.
I think we're probably going to be somewhat on the same page, and that's, he's talking 96% reduction in CO2, but there is also an element of commercialization for Norfolk, and I'm interested in some of the partnerships you have with those using your railroad to drive savings or to pass along opportunities to drive revenue for Norfolk. Can you just talk through the unit economics of what some of these reductions in carbon look like?
Yeah, so just think about just energy in general. We move a lot of energy across our network, whether that be sustainable aviation fuel, or whether it be things like coal. And our shippers are really, we're connected to that whole ecosystem. We move the feedstocks as well for a lot of energy that's made. So, CO2, that's a place where we play as well. We move that product for industries that need to utilize that. And so it's really a unique revenue play as we think about decarbonization of freight can be really expensive, and so if you think about alternative fuels like hydrogen, that's very expensive for us, not as a fuel, but also as we think about the whole infrastructure of our fueling infrastructure that have to be replaced. So put that in scale, we use around 1 million gallons of diesel a day at 50 locations for 3,000 locomotives. So it's just the pure scale of that. So when you can partner with someone like a Remora that has a solution that can reduce it 70% right then and be really cost affordable in doing that, it just makes economic sense at the end of the day. And you pencil it out like that, then it makes it a lot easier to get approval from our folks that need to put these units in service and to keep them moving across our network.
And when you think about the profile of diesel, I just quick for the audience, I think you're going to be able to capture upwards of 5,000 pounds an hour off these locomotives. Again, depends on how the diesel is burning, what we have in there. The ability to capture volume over something like a truck is substantial, which is really exciting. You talk about the 1 million gallons being burned. The opportunity, the upside here is huge. And we talk often about kind of the drop in the bucket, but how do you go make large impact? And this absolutely has the size and scale to do just that.
Yeah. Locomotives hold around 5,000 gallons of diesel. So you may be filling them up once a week. So that's over 50 tons of CO2 that you can capture and then take to market in the market that product. So it's a really unique solution. And I think what we're looking at is the timing of the two offtake would occur when we have refueling events. So it would be easy to position contractors there, and the time it takes to fuel a locomotive and other maintenance, 30 plus minutes, you could easily offload the CO2 in that amount of time and also perform some level of maintenance to the capture car.
So talk about the ecosystem really quick, because I get the sense that the general public doesn't really truly understand that the value of freight through rail, that you could take an entire container ship, land it from Asia to Los Angeles, say, at that port. The worst thing in the world to do is stick that on a freight truck and drive it across the country, drive it to the Midwest, do that. Best thing to do is put all those containers onto rail. So when you talk about 1 million gallons of diesel a day, that sounds like a big number. The alternative is having 5,000 trucks dispersing and all of that. So, that's the real pain point there. So if you can get down to close to zero emissions just on that rail, you have now taken those containers from wherever they came in at port and basically zero emissions to point of use for the most part, and then you truck it and point, hub and spoke it from there. So does this make rail even that much more viable for freight forwarding and give you that much more of a competitive advantage against all other freight forwarding?
Oh, for sure. It's a huge competitive advantage. To put it in perspective, we move around 29% of all the freight 10 miles. That's rail in North America, but we only make 6% of the emissions. Trucking, on the other hand, moves are over 41% of freight 10 miles, but they make over 70% of all the emissions. And the point is 20 or half of those emissions are coming from 20% trucks. And those are the trucks that are doing long distance trips over 500 miles. And that's our sweet spot. We're more economical, we're safer, and we're a lot more environmentally friendly moving that product over land. So it's a great solution. And you're not just connected to our ecosystem. When you're connected to Norfolk Southern, you're connected to the entire rail system in North America. So we partner with all the 6 Class 1 railroads, and we've got over 200 short line railroads that we partner with as well. But we partner with Maritime. Maritime is a huge partner of ours. We're moving product all over the world, and we partner with trucks. Because lots of cases you need those trucks for that first and final mile. So it's an entirely connected ecosystem, and there's lots of opportunities for driving efficiency.
Well, let's try to tie that back really quick to Remora. We're going to try something here really quick we've never actually tried to do. So when we had Paul Gross on the pod a couple of years ago, we actually kind of fed into this question. It just randomly came up as like, great technology for trucks, but could you use it for rail? And I mean, I think now I see where the trucks almost are the secondary, but that now, like you say, if you're just having hub and spoke back into the rail yards from where you've dispersed this, now that technology has a great home there as well. Now thinking about that, if you're offloading the CO2 that you've captured from the rail at the rail yard, and you're distributing, the hub and spoke fleet trucks, those are coming back to that same place too. Talk about that really quick if you could. I don't know if that might be 2 steps down the road of where they're going, but I'm going to try to play this really quick. We'll see if it works. This was us talking with Paul a couple of years ago about this, but he had a great point. It's an all of the above solution.
We're working with folks like Ryder and Cargill, and we're really excited to be getting our first pilots on the road in the next 6 months.
Yeah, so I've got kind of 2-part question a little bit, but I'm not an advocate for or believer that electric trucks are really going to become something that really works, just from the battery size and capacities and range and things like that. However, hydrogen fuel cells and Nikola, what they're doing out there, I believe there's a lot of traction that's going to happen over that. How do you see that impacting your business? I think you've even called it kind of a bridge technology. I mean, sooner or later, we are not going to have diesel trucks with exhaust, but that's years, decades away before that goes. The second one that just kind of recently came to my mind in all of this, does this have a similar application in rail, in locomotives? Obviously, there's a huge amount of diesel exhaust that are coming off of that. Could we be doing the same thing there one day?
Yeah. So I think we really need an all of the above approach to decarbonization. There are so many vehicles on the road. There's so many different sources of carbon emissions that no one solution is going to be this perfect silver bullet. We shouldn't, put all of our eggs in one basket, because we need solutions really quickly. This is a crisis that we're in. The problem is happening right now. So we can't wait decades for a slow transition.
So yeah, I mean, I now you can start to see this thing really come together. So I think it's outstanding, and I think we're going to see some dramatic changes. Do you think? Obviously, again, it's an all of the above solution, but is this the future for rail, for getting to Tier 4, or are there other alternatives that are kind of on the horizon there?
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of different pathways. I was actually with one of our locomotive OEMs and my counterparts at the other railroads just last week in Chicago. And there's a lot of different technology solutions being deployed. I would say as we think about the next 20, 30 years, it's going to be low carbon fuels. It's going to be biodiesel. Those products are very mature. We produced over 5 billion gallons of those products in the U.S. just last alone. And there's a lot more feedstocks out there, so we can scale that. I think as we think about locomotive technology, we're very invested in modernizing existing locomotives. So if we think about taking a unit that's already a diesel electric unit, how can we add more battery capacity to a locomotive and create a hybrid? So think about going to 1 megawatt hour battery capacity could reduce fuel consumption up to 20%. And that's available on an existing locomotive. And so I think the hybrid option is really kind of a near-term pathway. We've got a project announced with Alstom in New York State where we're going to be running a full battery unit with a backup diesel engine on board. That way you don't have to charge the unit, because that's one of the challenges we face as we look across our grid. There's just not the capacity. When you start talking utilities about, hey, I need this much power for a locomotive, and it's equivalent to 83 Tesla fast chargers, it's a quick conversation. There's just not that much grid capacity out there. And so by creating a hybrid unit, you've got the charging capacity on board if you need it, but you're also pulling the energy from braking as well and charging those batteries. The combination of the fuels and the batteries is going to get us a long ways over the next 20 to 30 years.
Josh, that brings up an interesting point, because I think we're talking about the near to midterm with the capture of the CO2 and then potentially seeing improvements in technology around battery. But you mentioned the offloading of CO2 at some of these hubs. Now, again, we've got the end users, people that are interested in CO2. So we see a new source coming online, or you sequester. But I'm curious what your plans are to do it, like what you will do with the CO2. Does Norfolk want to be involved there? And then going 30, 40, 50 years down the line, you've now built up this infrastructure to supply CO2 if that's the path you go, and then potentially wean that off as we go to more batteries. Maybe something you are not even going to have a part in as Norfolk, but really curious what happens to the captured CO2 tomorrow and in 50 years.
Yeah, I think it's probably kind of early in the pilot right now to even think about that, Luke. I think as we think about where we're going to choose a location for the first unit, it's going to have to be somewhere where it's a captive train that's going back and forth. So maybe like Southeast, we've got a lot of locations that are from a port to an inland port where those trains back and forth every day. That allows us to keep the unit captive in that location and the tender unit. So that's probably where we would start at. But we would also look at the market as well. Where's that market where the price for CO2 is more? As you know, the Southeast can be that market a lot of times. So that's one of the plays as well, is we can move the unit around as needed based on what the market dynamics are. That'll be dictated by Remora primarily, but we'll have some input in that as well. And we can connect them to the off-taker, the folks that need the CO2.
So not to say that the FRA moves slowly, but they're not the fastest. They were very, very reluctant to do LNG on board for transport, for fueling the locomotives. Very, very reluctant, and they're still reasonably reluctant. CO2 we already transport by rail. You have CO2 rail cars all day. We built. Any concerns of regulatory impact on some of these things, or getting that passed by capturing it and storing it on board? I can't imagine there would be, but that seems like a pretty easy path. But any concerns there?
I'm definitely not an expert there, Jeff, but it sounds like if you're already transporting it, it just makes sense, right? So I don't think there's a big regulatory hurdle there like there may be with something like transporting hydrogen, for example. That's a whole new different ballgame. But FRA right now is a lot more focused on technology. There's a lot of things that have been approved for technology testing that wasn't approved under the prior FRA. So there's a lot of things that we could do in the technology space, new things that are out there, autonomous, potential rail cars as well. There's a lot of advancements, a lot of smart people out there working on stuff, and I just get to talk to them and learn about their technology.
Yeah. So I've got to ask now, what's your next futuristic, altruistic bet, something crazy that you're seeing and it may never come to fruition, but it's got you up at night thinking about it?
I would say it's interesting what Parallel Systems is doing. They've got their project has been testing out in California. They've just got their approval to test here in Georgia, and so they're partnering in Wyoming, testing a fairly long distance from the Port of Savannah over to inland Georgia, the autonomous bogies that transport containers in platoon. So it's a really interesting technology. They've got a lot of smart engineers, folks, former Tesla engineers, for example, SpaceX folks. And it's really exciting. They've got a lot of investment as well.
Cool. It seems like, Josh, and it's probably one of my favorite parts about hearing about Norfolk is the relationship with the other railroads. So it sounds like you and you said your counterparts are going around and you're seeing new technologies. That certainly feels like a rising tide lifts all boats. Can you talk a little bit about what that relationship looks like for rail and how you are all kind of moving in unison?
Yeah, so all 6 of the Class 1 railroads have committed to Science-Based Target Initiative, along with some of the regional and short line railroads as well. And it really takes an industry solution, Luke, because we're limited in suppliers, right? We've got 2 primary locomotive OEMs in North America. We really rely on a lot of the same suppliers for technology and different pathways. And so it takes us working together. Norfolk Southern, we can't test everything that's out there. We need other railroads to test various technologies as well, and we need to learn from one another. And so that's what we're doing. We partner through the Association of American Railroads. We've got a number of committees there. I currently serve on the Environment and Climate Committee, also serve on the Decarbonization Working Group, and we've got regular engagements ongoing, learning from one another. We also operate the rail testing facility out of Pueblo, Colorado, called MXV. And so that's where a lot of that testing takes place as well. But yeah, there's a lot of support across the industry, and there's a lot of focus from our customers. A lot of our customers have decarbonization targets, but it's also economic savings for us. Diesel fuel is our number 2 expense. So we are very incentivized to reduce our fuel consumption. We've been investing in our fleet. In fact, we've set 4 quarterly records for locomotive fuel efficiency over the course of last year. And so it's a huge, huge emphasis for us as we think about fuel consumption in general, and also how do you incorporate other technologies that are coming online.
What's the number one expense? I would have thought diesel.
That's going to be people.
People, I was thinking that would be what I thought. I was like, that's even more expensive than that. On that technology aspect, I was on a panel a few weeks ago with a gentleman. They were you mentioned a minute ago the braking, energy capture from the braking for regenerative power. Is that viable? Is that something that you guys are also testing? That's something. See, he was so exponentially smarter than I was that I couldn't even wrap my head around most of it.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting.
Yeah, no, I was actually on a unit last month out in Pueblo. We started in fully electric mode, battery mode, got the train up to 60 miles an hour just off pure batteries. At some point, we started the diesel motor, and then we started running pure hybrid mode, and you could see where the horsepower was coming from, and about 80% coming from the diesel engine and 20% from the batteries. And so you saw the battery level kind of slowly discharge. And then when we went into dynamic braking, you saw those batteries charge back up very quickly. So you're a lot of energy on a train when you go into braking. So how can we develop systems that collect that and store that energy on board? So it's real, it's happening, and those pilots are out there right now.
Yeah, that technology is not all that new, right? I mean, they use that on Tesla and other vehicles today, which I was not aware of. I thought that was really intriguing.
It's just a locomotive 200 tons, so there's a little bit of different scale.
Yeah, it's a scaling issue. Minor details. I don't know. A Cybertruck's getting pretty big these days. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the general public thinks about rail as just kind of old school, right? You drive by infrastructure that's been around for a long time and it's not front of mind, but what an innovative space. Yeah. I really like it. This is one of the more interesting conversations we've had around technology, and you're all over the board. Again, it's not just focused on the carbon capture, but yeah, really, really intriguing and kind of exciting. I might go work for rail. So
a lot of space. I'll work dive space.
He just wants to wear the suspenders
and
the locomotive cap. No, not once they go autonomous. I'm never going to have a chance to wear it.
Yeah. So let's just wrap up, if you would. I mean, you mentioned more than just this CO2 side of it, but some of the other initiatives, I think, to Luke's point, it's not even just the technology, but all of your green initiatives that you've been doing for 25 plus years at Norfolk. I mean, you called it nature-based or natural-based solutions. What are some of these other initiatives that we're talking about? Because I'm sure, like, kind of to Luke's point, people see a locomotive, black smoke coming out of it, just old school Wild West type of mentality. That's not even close to what you guys are. So what are some of the other initiatives you guys work through?
So in 2 years, we'll celebrate our 200th year anniversary. We actually started in a railroad and we burn wood in our steam locomotives for over 30 years. So we relied on wood-related products. We also built the rail infrastructure. It was entirely wood. And of course, we ship a lot of wood products today. And so we were an early investor in forest carbon projects over 20 years ago, both on our own property. We did 10,000 acres project in South Carolina and another 10,000 acres up and down the Mississippi River Alluvial Valley for multiple private landowners. And so we've been involved in that space. It's really about, how can we clean the air? Over a third of the CO2 out there is from land use change. And so helping land use change is more a holistic solution for us. It's about cleaning air, it's about cleaning water, providing habitat for wildlife. But we've done a lot of other ecosystem restoration projects, restoring forests, restoring wetlands, streams. We just restored a shoreline in Norfolk, 1,500 feet there, and that's certified as a nutrient credit bank in the state of Virginia. It's just thinking more holistically and how can we reduce costs and in some cases create revenue streams from thinking creatively. So it's really win-win solution all the way around for sustainability. It's about using the economic drivers. It's about doing things good for the environment and doing things that are good for people.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, Josh, I think I speak for both of us to appreciate the example of stewardship and also the common sense approach to it. Really interesting, and I think long term that's the winning strategy. What do I know? But it seems to be working 200 years now. Y'all are on it, so really great.
They might have learned a thing or two along the way.
Yeah, of course. You gotta learn lessons. So, Josh, how can we help? How can our audience help? I'm thinking of things like CO2 Solutions Coalition, a lot of UDC. But yeah, what can we do to help locomotive and and really focus on your mission.
I would say just continue to support the CO2 industry. I think that's a great way that you all could contribute. We've got to be able to move the product around. We need infrastructure and products like you make.
Awesome.
We like to build it.
Yeah, we do for sure. So, Josh, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for the time today. Really informative episode, and we're going to be tracking what you're doing with Remora and the capture. I hope to have you back on in a year or two, and we're talking about a big victory there amongst many others. Fantastic. We'll talk to you soon. Take care, sir.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.